Venom: The Last Dance is the third and final installment of the Venom trilogy, at least for now. You never know sometimes with these movies that, make money, that are pretty popular amongst fans, like they might try to bring it back, especially, years down the line if a studio is desperate for a hit. So we'll see. But as far as like the 3-movie arc that Eddie and Venom have been on, this is it. This time around, they are being pursued by the authorities because of what happened at the end of Venom 2, and also they have become aware of a new threat in the name of Null. He is sending out these creatures called the Xenophage after them because Venom has something that he needs. So not only are they on the run from, the secret military Area 51 authorities, but they're on the run from this alien symbiote creating guy. And that's the movie. It's a road trip, baby! Let's just cut to the chase. If you've been familiar with the channel, you know I'm not a fan of not even just these Venom movies, but the Sony Spider-Man villain movies where there's no Spider-Man and also no villains. Like they're not even anti-heroes. Like they're just turning these villainous characters into heroes. I've not been a fan of them. Not to say that you can't make anything good, that you can't make changes, because obviously in comics you have so many over the years, you have so many different runs and iterations of characters and stories, you can really do anything you want, and because I'm not the biggest comic book reader in the world, I used to read a little bit when I was a kid, not really anymore. Any comic book knowledge I have now is purely me looking it up. So I don't care about any adhering to comic book rule or anything like that. I just want to see a good movie, and I just do not think they have been delivering, at least for me. I will say though that the Venom movies are definitely way more watchable than something like Madam Web or Morbius. Actually, I take that back because Madam Web is very embarrassing. I've talked about it here on the channel for a very long time. I think it's a very embarrassingly incompetent kind of movie, but I have seen it twice. In a very, it's so bad, there's something entertaining about it way. I can enjoy Madam Web. Morbius is just very, very boring, generic, and dull, an unlikable lead character played by an unlikable leading man. So Venom at least has a little bit more going for it, I think purely just based off of what Tom Hardy is able to, create when he acts off himself as Venom and Eddie. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of those movies, I can at least admit that. I was a little curious to see how this specific one was going to go, only because Kelly Marcel, who is, one of the co-writers on the first Venom, they brought her back as the sole screenwriter for Venom 2. Now she is, writing again and also directing the film. It started off with Ruben Fleischer. He couldn't come back for 2. They got Andy Serkis, and then Andy Serkis, I think he had some commitments to other projects as well, so he couldn't come back. So Kelly Marcel, this gave her the opportunity to come into the director's chair. And then also, similar to Venom 2, Tom Hardy once again shares a story credit on this film. So for all intents and purposes, this should be their vision, these two working together, this should be the story that they want to tell, especially now that she's not passing the script off to some other guy to make it. She's like the guardian of the script in a way, so especially since they're producers. So I went into this movie thinking maybe there's going to be something there since they've been so passionate about these movies and working on them together. Maybe there is something there, even though the marketing isn't really doing it for me, and I'm aware that I am not a fan of these movies. People are fans of this though. I remember when the first movie came out, I was like, I don't know if people are even going to accept this. I think this could be just a flat out rejection. Critics were not liking it by the time I had seen it, so I was kind of in that mindset of I don't think, hardcore Spider-Man fans are going to like this, especially since there's no Spider-Man and they're doing an origin without him when Peter Parker plays a pretty good role in the Eddie Brock story. But, it made a lot of money, and the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for both films are very high. The critic score even went up for Let There Be Carnage. That one's a little bit more mixed as opposed to just a flat out ew, gross kind of score. And even though Let There Be Carnage didn't make as much as the first Venom, that came out in 2021 when we were still 2 months away from No Way Home really bringing in a box office resurgence as far as grossing $1 billion. So at the time, it did really well, all things considered, you know what I mean? That was one of the movies that was, ushering in people coming back. You had Godzilla and Kong that year, Shang-Chi, brought in some decent people, and Black Widow, even with the same day and date release thing. So Venom 2 was amongst those films as far as bringing people back. So people want to see it. So people want to see this one. There's already been people hyping it up. I can't wait to see this. And if you are one of those people, if you enjoyed the last 2 movies and you you're already excited for this, you'll probably have a good time with this. You know, you don't need to watch the rest of this if you don't want to. You know, you'll probably enjoy this film. Do not want to take anything away from you guys. Your feelings are very valid. I will say, though, that as soon as it started and we got like this like video game cutscene-esque kind of sequence where the character Null is like monologuing with this like very weak-ass dialogue to like the xenophage creatures. He's like monologuing to them about stuff they probably know if they can understand him in that way. You know, obviously he's talking to the audience when he, you know, says this stuff, but in the context of the scene, it's just, he's saying this stuff that he's probably already told them in a very weird theatrical way. And as soon as I saw that scene, I was like, okay, here we go. The entire structuring of this movie, it feels very like rushed, kind of like haphazardly put together. And, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this was made during the strikes last year. They finished the script before the writer's strike, so they started production with what they had, but then they had to shut down only a couple weeks in because of the actor's strike. So they were able to restart in November when every strike ended, and then they finished in February of this year. So 8-month difference as far as like wrapping principal photography and then getting to the release date now. But it's weird because I feel like I can still tell, like it's almost like they were writing this in a rush almost, like, okay, let's just get the bare minimum together so we can start shooting. But like, I feel like, you know, if they were so close to starting at some point anyways, you know, they were trying to aim for a July release date of this year, shouldn't the script have been locked beforehand? Like, it's still, I'm not sure why it feels so sloppy the way it does. It's easy to just write it off as the writer's strike and the actor's strike that happened, but I don't know. There's even a way that like Eddie and Venom, like the way they converse with each other in this film, and you know, actors still try, you know, Tom Hardy, you know, he's still trying to make this work, and he's not like completely awful, even if like there's still certain moments where I'm like, why are we committing this specific line read? Why did you direct him this way? Oh my God, you know, the voice is sometimes hard to get over, but he still tries. But there are still points where I'm like, something feels off about the way he and Venom are interacting with each other. He's saying a lot of like expository stuff, like, what are we gonna do? They're after us now, like that kind of stuff. And Venom will just chime in with like repeating it, but saying it dumber. Or, you know, just like saying a comment that doesn't add anything. It feels like a bit of a step down from even their interactions in the last two movies, which, like I've said, didn't really care for, but I at the very least appreciated what they were going for with that relationship, those two. And this one, it feels very off. It's hard to describe exactly. Like, it's a writing thing, it's a, you know, directing of your actor. I don't know, something felt really off about it. It didn't really have the same magic. It does have its moments of like, oh, we're doing some of the comedy that you love, but it doesn't even like hit the like same kind of levels of like zany that the other two movies have had. It feels very like tame, all things considered, which is kind of weird to say. When I say like it's sloppily put together, like by the end of the movie, there are like certain plot threads that just kind of end, and it doesn't feel like there's like a good clear resolution to it, or they're giving the illusion of like this is a, you know, put a bow on it kind of perfect emotional ending, and it's like I feel like you could have beefed this up and made it a little better, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. And even the way they try to make certain like side characters more interesting, it doesn't really click for me. Like Juno Temple plays like a curious scientist type, like I'm investigating symbiotes that we have here under Area 51. It's not Area 51, it's Area 55 ? And they give her this backstory involving this brother, and I was like, in what way is this going to like pay off? And I mean, they do try to pay it off, but it's almost kind of like, for this character, like throughout the rest of the movie, she is not memorable enough to warrant this. And even some of the imagery at the start of like establishing her character, like helicopter flying down, she's looking out of like her bedroom, and it's this like big glass like window wall. It reminded me a lot of like Arrival. It almost felt like they were trying to go for that at first. Which is like, man, if you're gonna steal from something as great as Arrival, maybe you try to, you know, steal other parts, like making the character interesting. She has like another like a curious scientist type who's like her underling, something like that. And I always, it was odd, you know, because I felt like they're setting up something here. What is it? You know, the way they were directing her to perform, how they, you know, put her into the movie. It's like, they're setting up something. I'm not sure what it is. And then when you see where it goes, it's like, is that it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm getting nothing here. Chiwetel Ejiofor, he's one of the actors he's always good and stuff, and he's trying to make something work, especially with a character as flat and generic as Strickland, or it's Rickland. I'm not even sure. I don't remember. He's generic military guy. But yeah, no matter how hard he tries, like I just said, he's just generic military guy at the end of the day. What do you want? Rhys Ifans, even though he played the Lizard in the Amazing Spider-Man and Spider-Man No Way Home, he's back in this, not as that character, as like a hippie conspiracy theorist dad. His wife is played by Alana Ubach. They have 2 kids. They're in like this hippy dippy van, and they bump into Eddie because they're trying to find Area 51 and just look at, like, go around on base and stuff like that, find aliens. And there's like one moment when like Eddie is interacting with them, and I was like, okay, if it's a brief stop so he can just like communicate with human beings and have like some kind of human connection, cool enough, and Rhys Ifans, he's a good actor, he tries. Alana Ubach, same thing, even the kids. But they keep that family around too long. Like, once again, why is this being committed to the film? Why was this the choice? Is it just so Eddie has like some normal people to look out for? It's not enough that, the third act takes place in like this top secret lab area field where he has to look out for like these scientists. They also need him to look out for like the innocent bystanders, the normal people, at least as normal as you can get with conspiracy nut family. I don't understand why they were making a lot of these decisions. I know it's a road trip movie, and on road trip movies, you bump into stuff, you meet people with quirks, they're interesting, you're not sure how they're going to come into play, maybe they come back later, but it just feels very sloppy in this. Even them setting up, like, the road trip story is just like, God, it feels very rushed, and also it's weird the way the movie opens. I mentioned the like null introduction cutscene bit, but like my impression at the end of Venom 2 was like they're already on the run, like they're aware they're being hunted, but then they have him watching news footage of like, this happened in San Francisco and Stephen Graham, blah blah blah, and he's like, oh no, they're gonna think we did that or something like that. It's like, well, yeah, isn't that why you were on the run in Venom 2? And they're just reiterating the information that, like, fans obviously already know, don't they? Like, am I missing something here? Like, it just feels very slapdashed. Another thing I wanted to mention really quick is the way they reference the No Way Home post-credit scene, because they do. It's nothing spoilery. Obviously, it barely plays a part. It's the opening outside of the Null thing. Right after that, you get him recreating the bar scene. So they do the post-credit scene again, but this time it's not as good. Like, watching both scenes back to back, it's not this impressive, like, look at how they're able to recreate it. It's like, man, he gave a noticeably better performance in the post-credit scene than this recreation. They change up, like, in No Way Home, the way he goes home, like, he starts glowing and he disappears, like how everyone else did. In this movie, a portal opens up behind him and he gets sucked. And then he's back to this movie's universe. Same bar and the same bartender is there. It's just now he's in this universe's version, and then they do the same thing of, like, he leaves the bar at some point after making a drink, leaves a coin tip, and there's Venom gunk on there. This time it's so the Chiwetel Ejiofor character can get it for the scientist, but it's like, you're just doing the post-credit scene again, even down to leaving a bit of him on the counter. Why? You know what I mean? Like, it's repetitive. It's not as good as when I saw it the first time. Why is this the jumping off point? Is there any other way we can continue this or acknowledge it? Why are we doing any of this, actually? I feel like I've talked about Null quite a bit already, and I haven't mentioned the biggest problem is that he's barely in this. He's like the worst version of, like, Thanos. He sits in a chair, he, waxes poetic about, I'm gonna destroy your world, and as soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna destroy this world. And that screen time totals up to, like, maybe, like, a minute and a half, maybe, of him being on screen, having any impact. He's, like, the villain. The Xenophage are the ones that Venom is fighting, though. They have no personalities, they're just creatures. But Null is like the villain with a face, with a voice, he talks, he can, he has a personality surely under there, right? But, like, they never interact, he's just always locked away. Why am I supposed to fear this guy? Like, watching one movie where he makes these appearances, I'm like, this guy seems fucking lame as hell. And then the one shot they show, like, his face, the CGI looks fucking weird, like, syncing it up to the actor's performance. It's like, God, that looks so odd. I said the actor, it's Andy Serkis. I think they didn't announce that because they're trying to build some hype over Null, but as I've already told you, he's barely in this. It's not like it's a spoiler to mention that it's Andy Serkis doing it, because it's not like it has any impact on the universe, or like, what does this mean for Ulysses Claw or some shit? It doesn't matter. It's a voice, and he's barely in this, so temper your expectations if you're like, really hyped to see Null. He's not in. They're very obviously, I think, setting it up for maybe the Tom Holland Spider-Man to fight him or something. I don't know. We'll see if that even pans out. I almost feel bad for Tom Holland because if they are gonna like set up like Null for like now he's gonna fight Tom Holland Spider-Man and he's gonna have to do another multiverse with the Madam Web and Morbius and bring Tom Hardy back. If that's like the plan, man, he's just getting like the worst fucking roster of characters. Starting off so strong with like Michael Keaton, he's great as the Vulture. Jake Gyllenhaal, so good as Mysterio. And then with No Way Home, as much as, you know, it was good, and good utilization of the, at least those villains, but it is like, man, it's gonna be weird when you make another Spider-Man movie and try to bring those characters back, like make new versions of them, because he's like already like had experiences with them. You're gonna have to reinvent the wheel with some of them, you know, do different takes, you know, good luck on that. And now it's like, if they really are setting up, like Tom Holland has to like travel the multiverse again and assemble the fucking Madam Webs and Morbiuses, I don't know, man. I feel so bad. His roster fucking sucks. Tangent over. Let's keep talking about the movie. Even though Kelly Marcel is directing, I don't want to say like, oh, it's very obviously a first-time director. Like, she directs it about as well as Ruben Fleischer did in the first movie. I think Andy Serkis, even though I'm still not a fan of the movie overall, I think Andy Serkis technically, like on a technical level, directed his movie the best, that is. I feel like this movie also has like better action scenes than Ruben Fleischer did, so I think that's why I give her the edge over him, because the action in his movie was just like mostly lame. There's like the one cool bit in the fog, like in the like hotel lobby or something like that, but like every other scene is just like generic as shit. There's like admittedly some like cool action beats that happen where I'm like, okay, that's cool. I think it's still kind of bogged down that editing, it's a little too choppy for me. Visually, I've always had a problem with the visual effects in these movies. Like sometimes you'll get a cool thing. Like in this movie, it's the Xenophage. I thought they looked amazing. Like I was like, wow, that looks spectacular. And then there's so many shots of like Venom. And once again, this is common in the other two movies where I'm like, oh, that doesn't look the best. Like that doesn't like, oh, well, okay, that one looks pretty good. Like, okay, that's good. Like they've captured some, ooh, never mind. Fuck that. That looks awful. With a generic ass score, you know, highlighting the sequences in this movie as well. It's like, yeah, like I said, it just, as far as Kelly Marcel's first time directing, you know, I feel like if you had no experience with the other two Venom movies, you might be like, oh, very obvious, what a sloppy movie or something. But I feel like in context, it's kind of like, well, you know, it's about the same. Not as good as 2, but about the same as the first movie. Maybe even a little bit better than the first movie. But I don't know, there's a certain way that movie looks, like cinematography-wise, how they've visually made that look compared to like how they've shot this movie, that I feel like I prefer still though. But I feel like there's maybe like some better jokes in this version and some better action beats in this one. I don't know. Mixed bag, baby. In their sloppy setup of the story, they have now established that Venom is kind of like a MacGuffin. If he transforms into full Venom mode, the Xenophage can track him. Very Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins puts on the ring style. So he can, for some reason, pull his head out and like talk to Eddie that way, like through the shoulder, or just like stay in Eddie's body. But oh no, don't transform into full Venom because then you can be tracked. Okay, whatever. The Xenophage, they established early on that they can like open portals to anywhere, and Venom encounters like this lead scout of the Xenophage like pretty often, and there's no point where that one is like calling for everyone else to come and just like swarm this guy. It's usually just on its own until of course the third act, when you gotta have more. It's the third act, we gotta go bigger. And a lot of the sequences are just like, you know, Venom is, you know, going about, and then, oh, it's the military, and then the Xenophage arrives, or it's reversed. You know, Xenophage arrives and then the military. It's like, it's repetitive. You know, they're not really doing anything else interesting to like elevate it or, you know, have a natural progression. There's even a point where it gets dumb, where they give a cameo to Miss Chen because, you know, character from that last two movies, and this is the last one, you can put her in. I'm totally fine with seeing Miss Chen again. She's usually fine in the other two movies, especially those two interacting. But in this movie, there's a point where, you know, a part of it is just like they want to do a dance, and Venom wants to do it when he's in full Venom mode, much to the chagrin of Tom Hardy, who's like, dude, you literally told me if we transform into full Venom, they can track us. And he's like, I never do anything fun. So he does it, and then, you know, Xenophage arrives, and it's like, why? Like, why would you do that just for the sake of them dancing to ABBA's Dancing Queen? Because of course it's fucking Dancing Queen. And, you know, it's not even like a good, like, choreographed dance or like this, wonderful moment of cinematography and editing. It's, once again, just choppy. Go from one shot to the next real quickly. Yeah, it's like Mrs. Chen I'm fine with seeing again, especially in like a Vegas setting, somewhere completely away from like that convenience store. But in this context, once you continue that further into this, like, just them making a dumb choice just so they can do this dance scene because maybe it can be memed, maybe the audiences who really love when we get wacky will enjoy this. I don't know. I feel like that's a very cynical and dumb choice to do that. I feel like there's so much more I could be mentioning about this movie. Like, Stephen Graham is technically back, but it's like a very thankless like appearance for him. It's basically just, he's back so they can, give him an ending as opposed to where they left him in Venom 2. It basically, most of it is just him doing that one scene in Independence Day with the Brent Spiner when they shove him up against the glass and he's talking, the alien is talking through him, that kind of thing. A very thankless appearance. He's like sleepwalking through it as well. Most of the time he's taken over by like a CGI thing. It's, man, and the way they get him out of the movie is like kind of funny, actually. No spoilers, but it's kind of funny how they get his ass out of the movie. There's even a point though in the third act where, speaking of just like dumb shit, it's like this, they're like I mentioned, they're like at Area 55 is where the third act is like taking place, and they have a bunch of symbiotes there, obviously, because that's the research facility. This is stuff that I've mentioned. This is not a spoiler. But there is a point where, for the sake of action, they start latching onto people and they go full, like, their own version of Venom mode and participating in the action. And in the audience I was in, there was, like, some, like, whoa! And, like, some, like, claps, like, kind of, like, guys, come on, really? For this? But it was like, man, I remember in the first Venom, it was a whole thing with Riz Ahmed. He's testing out these symbiotes on any willing participants, like the homeless people he abducts, stuff like that, and it wasn't really working. It was, like, rare that you could have, like, a symbiotic relationship like Eddie had with Venom. And then, of course, Riz Ahmed had with Riot. Carnage was, like, created in what's his name? Woody Harrelson, but the character I don't know, the actor I know. But it's rare to have like that bond and have it be perfect, especially so spontaneous. But in this, it's like, just latch on and do it. I guess there was a bit of that in Let There Be Carnage as well, when Venom was like, obviously he wore him out, but he was able to like merge with these people and go full Venom mode in that like breakup bit that they had in that movie. But they're just continuing it with this, and it's a little bit more dumb. Just like, I feel like they were trying to do something like so exciting for fans, something that was going to really win people over, something exciting and visually interesting, because, it's a bunch of different colored Venoms, that can do some different things. But I was just like, I shouldn't be questioning the logic of this, but when it's like this, like, apparent, when it's this kind of like clumsily handled, I can't help it. There's plenty of things in like blockbusters, not even just comic book movies, where like, I can like start thinking about it, but then I'm like, well, maybe they figured it out. Maybe it just doesn't apply. Like, if it's a strong enough movie, you can have that part of your brain go like, well, whatever. It doesn't really matter if it is that or whatever. Maybe there's just this thing I'm not thinking of. But when the rules are kind of like clearly laid out at the start, and it was shaky foundation to begin with, but then you continue it, you know what I mean? I can't help it. Like I mentioned before, I walked in with some kind of optimism since it was Kelly writing and directing, in all intents and purposes, the guardian of this screenplay with this studio, and her and Tom Hardy working so close together. I really wanted to like this, since this is, their vision all the way through, it would seem at the very least. But man, I feel so left out. So many people have fun with these movies, and I'm not sure where the general consensus is going to land on this one yet, but I can't do it. When you get to the end and it's trying to show you this montage of like all the good times, isn't this a perfect, satisfying, emotional conclusion? I'm just like, man, I'm just glad this is fucking over. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about another Venom movie, at least like in the immediate future. I'm gonna give Venom: The Last Dance a D+. This movie is very stupid, I think very sloppily structured, and very sloppy as far as like certain technical aspects of the directing. I don't think it's a bad idea plot-wise to introduce Null and these like different symbiote elements, the xenophage creatures and stuff like that. Some actors are trying, as always. There's some jokes that made me chuckle, some action beats that I thought were pretty neat, but for the most part, it's just about the same as the rest of the movies. And look, it's better than Madam Web, it's better than Morbius, all three of these movies, but still, like, I can't join you guys. I can't join you guys that enjoy this. I'm sorry, but if you did enjoy the last two, you might enjoy this one about the same, maybe more, maybe less, that's up to you, but you know, have fun. You know, that's my only wish for you. I could not be there. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, though. Anyways, what did you think of Venom: The Last Dance? Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I feel like I'm missing so much that I want to talk about, so if you have stuff you want to mention, let's talk about it. Let's do it, baby. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.